over here, this is the Thursday night, which is before a very big day on the Chabad calendar. This upcoming Wednesday is Yud Shvat, which is the Histalkus, Yom Histalkus, the Yartzeit of the Rebbe Rayatz.
By the way, we're for bringing here.
Okay.
Wednesday night?
Tuesday night.
And it is the day when the Rebbe obviously automatically became the Rebbe, because V'zarach HaShemesh U'ba HaShemesh. But also, 1 year later, on Yud Shvat, in the year Tafshin Yud Aleph, 1951, is when the Rebbe officially accepted the mantle of leadership. And this is something which I think we touch upon every single year, but it's also especially relevant, Bashkach Pratis, the period that we're talking about, which is the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away on a Shabbos. Yud Shvat was a Shabbos that year, in 1950, and because at that time the Frierdiker Rebbe was not saying Mamarim because of his speech impediment, he was impaired. His speech was impaired. So instead, he would write Mamarim, and then in advance of every significant day on the calendar, whether it was a Yom Tiv or whether it was a special day on his own personal calendar, the Chabad calendar, the Frierdiker Rebbe would give a mimer to be published and to be studied on the day, on that special day. So it came along Purim, he would give a mimer to be learned, and it was published beforehand, and it was meant to be, instead of the Rebbe saying a mimer on Purim, the Chassidim would learn that mimer on Purim. Yud Shvat was the yahrzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe's grandmother. His father's mother's name was Rivka, Rebbetzin Rivka, the wife of the Rebbe Maharash. She passed away in Yud Shvat in the year Tafresh Ayin Dalet, 1914. So in honor of the yahrzeit of his Baba, he gave out a mimer. Now this was a 4-part mimer, actually. The first part was for Yud Shvat, and each part was 5 chapters. There's a total of 20 chapters. The first part was 5 chapters. And then in the same kuntras also, there was another mimer, which was the second section. In other words, there's in a mimer it's called a hamshach, when you have a few mamorim, but it's like a serialized mimer. In other words, it comes in installments. The second mimer was for 3 days later, Yud Gimel Shvat, because Yud Gimel Shvat was the yahrzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe's mother. And then the next 2 parts, again, each one of them being 5 prakim, one was intended for Purim, was going to be printed for Purim, and one of them was going to be printed for Beis Nissen, which was the yahrzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe's father, the Rebbe Rashab. Anyways, that Shabbos, the Frierdiker Rebbe passes away. He passes away. So he wrote a mimer for his own day, and that mimer was called basi legani. And then in the years that followed, every single year on Yud Shvat, the Rebbe would say a mimer basi legani. That was part of there was a special mimer every single year. It was the Rebbe would make sure to mention all of the Rebbes and the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid in the mimer. He'd bring down a Torah from each one of them in the mimer. But every year, the Rebbe's mimer was based on 1 chapter. So in the first Tafshin Yud Aleph, the first year, the first mimer the Rebbe said was based on the first chapter of Basi Legani. And the second, 1952, was on the second chapter. They all started with the words Basi Legani. The Rebbe would quickly recap where we are, and then the Rebbe would focus, and the entire mimer was explaining and elaborating upon and bringing biurim from all the different Rebbeim on that 1 chapter. And this went on for 20 years. Because for 20 years, then until he finished. So in 1970, the Rebbe finished the first cycle of Basi Legani. In 1971, the Rebbe started again from the beginning. And 1971, the mimer again was on chapter 1. 1972 again was on chapter 2, and so on and so forth. And the Rebbe wrote that it has become the minig b'Chassidei Chabad that every year we learn 1 perik. So this year, we are now in the 4th round, because it was 73 years ago, this Talkus. So the 4th round, and this year will be Perik Yud Gimel. This year, that's the Perik that we study this year, chapter 13. And there are 2 Mamarim from the Rebbe, 1963 and 1983 was the 2 years in the cycle that we have Mamarim from the Rebbe. This book over here is called Sefer Mamarim Basi Legani, it's a 2-volume set, and this has this has the Mamarim from the Rebbe from 1971 in the second cycle. The first volume is the Mamarim from 1951 through 1970, and this is 1971 for the second cycle. So this year, as mentioned again, is chapter 13. So what is chapter 13 all about? So in chapter 13 of the Maimer, Perik Yud Gimel, just a little preface beforehand. The Frierdiker Rebbe talks there about the idea of the Bnei Yisrael are called Tzivos Hashem. We are called the army of Hashem. This week's parsha, we're called the army. Why are we called the army? Because we are in the front lines. We are the ones who are busy doing the milchama, the war, and that leads into a discussion. The Friedrich Rebbe talks about midas hanetzach. You know that we have 7 midas. One of our midas is netzach, which is the midah of being of victory. And who has the strongest midas hanetzach? The strongest midas hanetzach is to be found by a king. A king will do anything for victory. When a king is at battle, the king will. I mean, today we see out in the world, we see what people do for victory. Stupid, silly, right? The things, and to the extent, and what they're willing to sacrifice. And the way the Friedrich Rebbe puts in the Maimer is that a king is mevaziv is all his eisrus for the purpose of attaining victory. In other words, he's willing to give out everything that he has, all the money and the treasures that he had from generations that his ancestors had collected. When it comes to winning the war, the king gives up everything. And he gives up everything, but to who do those treasures go to? To the soldiers. In other words, everything is there to give the resources to the soldiers. All his eisrus are there to the foot soldiers to do the job. We are the foot soldiers of Hashem. We are tzivus Hashem. Which means, and we are the ones who are doing the job of doing the battle in this world to make this world into a dir b'tachtonim. So for us, Hashem gives us all the eitzers to do the job. What is the eitzer of Hashem? What is the treasure of Hashem? So the Maimer explains that the treasure of Hashem is the Eir Ein Sof. We have the power of the Eir Ein Sof, which is what gives us the power to win the battle. And in explaining what the Eir Ein Sof is, the Friedrich Rebbe brings down what is brought down in Kabbalah, that the Eir Ein Sof is Lamaila Maila Adin Kates, Ulamata Mata Adin Tachlis. It's high to the highest level and low to the lowest level. What does that mean? What does that mean that the Eir Ein Sof? So Maila indicates has its own large explanation. In the Perek of this year, the Friedrich Rebbe explains what does it mean that Eir Ein Sof is Lamata Mata Adin Tachlis. It comes down to the infinitely lowest levels possible. So I want to read you a little from what he writes over here. He says, I'm not going to read you the Hebrew because I'll just translate straight. That which it says, the Mata Adin Tachlis, this goes on the revelation and the manifestation that it's Bechinas Hispashtos. It spreads out. Bechinas Ein Sof ve'Ein Shir bli gvul mamish. There's no end, there's no limit, infinite. Ad Lamata Mata to the lowest level. That the Eir Ein Sof comes down even to the lowest levels. And that's what it means that the Eir Ein Sof is Lamata Adin Tachlis. That the light of the Eir Ein Sof is infinite and comes down even to the lowest level. And then he says, in what's called Eilam Ein Sof, in the infinite worlds, which is before the Tzimtzum, and even in the world of Atzilus. So it's not a chiddush, it's not a pella, it's not a wonder that the Eir Ein Sof is over there, because after all, it's a keli. We're talking about godly worlds. It's Atzilus, the world, the infinite worlds. But in the worlds of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya, the worlds of our worlds, now here is the fact that the Eir Ein Sof is present over here, that's already a chiddush. But it is. Then he continues, I'm not giving you word for word. And then he says, but then, even in the worlds of Biyah, in the worlds of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya, so you have Neshamas, and you have Malachim, and you have Olamas. The Neshamas are the pnimius of every world. The Neshamas are the highest thing in every world. The Malachim are the Chitzonius of the world. The angels are the Chitzonius, because relative to the real Kavanah, which is Neshamas, Malachim are Chitzonius. And the worlds themselves are Chitzonius of the Chitzonius. And the Eir Ein Sof is in the Olamis. Not only is the Eir Ein Sof in the Neshamas, it's also in the Malachim, it's even in the Olamis. And then after many Yishnalshalos, the light of the Eir Ein Sof, it gets hidden and more hidden until it reaches our world. And in our world, suddenly the Eir Ein Sof enters the Galgalim and the Mazalas. It enters the different forces of nature. And therefore everything that enters our world and our physical world is all through these different forces. As the Pasuk says, Memeged Tvoy Shamash, Memeged Gerish Yirachim. And this is a tremendous hashpala, tremendous degradation that the Lukus comes in, that godliness, the Ein Sof comes into this world and enters into the Klippas, until it comes into our physical world, until it enters into a space which can be the exact opposite of a Lukus. The Ein Sof enters a space which forgets on Hashem. As the Pasuk says, regarding Klippa and Sitrachra, it's actually about Pare. But what does Pare say? Li yo'er v'ani asisini. Pare says, the Nile, the Nilus belongs to me, and I created myself, which is obviously the Hepech HaEmes, the opposite of truth, because the truth is that Ve'yevarech Yaakov is Pare. The Yaakov bench Pare, and it's brought down in the Tanchuma, and Rashi brings it down also. That how did Yaakov bench Pare? He benched him that the Nilus should come up towards him, which is the tremendous hashpah from Hashem. But Pare, who's Melech HaMitzarim Ugvulim, the Friedrich Rebbe writes, he is the king of limitations. Mitzrayim means also, he's the king of limitations. He's a kafui toiva. In other words, he denies that toiva and says instead, Li yo'er v'ani asisini, it's all me, it's all about me, which is the Hepech HaEmes. And that is the Ein Sof. It comes down, and even this ultimately, where is it receiving its energy from the Ein Sof?
But Rabbi, something I can understand is, I thought that Yaakov blessed Paro and said that you're going to get bracha from the Nile River, from the Nilus. So it actually came, the bracha from the Nile, from the Nilus, actually came from Yaakov Avinu, no?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how can you say it came from him?
That's exactly the point.
He was Paro.
Because it's the lowest klippa possible. And the Ein Sof is there also. That's
Wow.
which is really a reflection of what we're talking about over here in our Pedic, how the Ein Sof is in everything, right? Now, it's easy for us to sit and laugh at Pare and laugh at Mitzrayim, right? Oh, lowliness. But obviously, as Chassidim, we know that everything that we learn about, we're learning about ourselves. So we're going to have to find out what is the Pare and what is the Mitzrayim within ourselves. So the Pedic Rebbe continues.
But the truth, Rabbi, is that I find I have got Paro in me.
That's what we're talking about.
I have to unlock Paro, and I have to get him out.
So what is that? So what is that Pare? That's what he's going to say right now.
Today's I don't know.
He says, right, he says, here it says it's somewhat different words. He says that this can be found both and by business people and by people who learn Torah. Because by business people, by someone who thinks that a business person who thinks that it's their own,
I did it.
yeah. Even though he knows and he believes that the Eibishter is the one who gives koyach lasis choyel, who gives you the power, and birchas Hashem hitasher, that ultimately all wealth comes from Hashem. And this is a person who mentions Shem Shemayim always, all the time you're saying, oh, Baruch Hashem, Yirtz Hashem, Be'ez Hashem. Nevertheless, he thinks that it's himself. He thinks that, even though he believes and he knows and he says Yirtz Hashem, but when you cut down to the chase of it, he believes that it's his own koyach. He believes that it's his own chachma. He's a smart guy. It's my business acumen that got this for me. And that's why, in a time when the business is going well, so Yo'is behavosei. It's also a pasuk in Tehillim. What does behavosei mean? Yo'is means he has chutzpah. Behavosei, in pasuk pshat, means with his evil, right? It's talking about. But the Friedrich Rebbe says, "Who misgoa be'etzem muhusei." Behavosei can also mean with his existence. I am proud of my existence. And you're so proud. Take a look. That business deal I did. I'm so smart. I'm so wise. And if business isn't going well, then it's a ganz not upgefallen. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm an awful businessman. And both aren't true. not the high when you're doing good, and not the low when you're not doing good. It's not, why? Because birchas Hashem yitasher, right? So therefore, you have to feel the same. You have to know that you have to do your work, and whatever happens is from the Eibusha. And the same thing is and if you don't feel that way, then you're like Pare. Obviously, in a very subtle way. Pare wasn't saying Yirtz Hashem, Baruch Hashem. But when we're realizing the klippa, we have to realize the klippa also, it's avodah within us. And the same thing is also when it comes to Yeshua, people who are learning Torah, that even though a person learns Torah and knows that it's Hashem's Torah, nevertheless, it's possible that Chalila, that even though he's learning Torah, he says something, a dvar halacha, which is opposite of Torah. Which is very similar to the business people, that even though he believes in Hashem 100%, right? Nevertheless, he gets all proud of himself when his business is doing well, and when when business isn't doing well, he gets all anxious. And the reason why is because, by the businessman, the reason why is because the whole foundation is not proper. Because the whole idea that he knows that Hashem is the one who gives him the wealth it's only Amunah Pshuta, but it's not something which has really permeated. And therefore, the result is, as mentioned earlier, and the same thing as people learn, that even though a person learns Torah, knows it's Hashem's Torah, but the actual learning isn't proper, and that's because when he learns Torah, he forgets about the one who gave Torah. Rather, he approaches Torah as an intellectual pursuit. And since it's intellect, it's seichel, so afterwards, when he knows what he learned, even though he knows in the back of his mind it's Hashem's Torah, it's intellect, and therefore he can say something and be medayik something which is the opposite of Torah. Which means, in general, it's a person who's receiving its energy from a lakus, and nevertheless, he can be the opposite of the Eibishter. That's the point there. And why is that? Because the Eir itself comes down in so many tzimtzumim, so many contractions, and so many concealments. This idea of teva, that the word teva is related to the word tubu b'yamsuf, nature. It's sunk, it's sunk to the point that it can't be seen. The Eir of Hashem is sunk and hidden very much until it comes down into the lowest levels possible. And this is once again, really echoing what we're learning about in this simon in the Ger Sakodesh, where we learned the idea of realizing the Eir Sof is everywhere. Even at the lowest level, the Eir Sof is there also, and therefore in everything there is a kavana, and we have to look around the world realizing that there's a purpose, and everything in the purpose is to get me to serve Hashem in a better and superior way.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.